All right, guys, welcome back to Mixtapes to Myself. For those of you who have been joining me, thank you so much. I do super appreciate anybody who's been watching these. Um, your support means a lot. Like I've said before, this story means a lot to me. I will be continuing the author's notes, and this chapter and this section of my life specifically was, let's just say, very interesting and not very fun because we are moving on to 2004. And this part for Sammy, this chapter specifically, is based in a ton of reality. Um, and we'll get into it in the author's notes, but this chapter specifically means a lot to me personally. And I was sad to put Sammy through it, but I think the character itself needed that kind of struggle to move forward to where she becomes, like where she ends up. So, without further ado, this is Chapter 9, Apologies and the Art of Making Yourself Smaller. Sam rolled over in her bed, clutching her animal print comforter, and looked at her alarm clock. Ugh, it's way too early, she said to herself. It was a Saturday, and she had planned to sleep in for as long as she could. She laid there, assessing how she felt, and realized there was no way she would be able to get back to sleep. She had inherited her lovely inability to sleep from her mother, who was also almost always up at the crack of dawn. She groaned again as she rolled out of bed, wiping the sleep from her eyes. She left her sheets and blanket in a pile as she stumbled out of her bedroom and slumped down the stairs. Her mom was standing at the counter with bleary, sleep deprived eyes, pouring coffee into one of the largest mugs they owned. Morning, sunshine, she said, sounding brighter and cheerier than she looked. Morning, Ma, Sam replied, definitely not matching her tone. Sam's voice always had a rasp in the morning that was half an octave lower than her normal daytime lilt. She grabbed a cup from the pantry and started pouring herself some coffee. I'm going to the grocery store this morning. Do you want to come with? Her mom asked her. When Sam was little, she always went grocery shopping with her mom because usually she was the only one awake at that hour. She always had been an early riser, although she was desperately trying to stop being one. Sundays were the only day she refused to get up early, and she forced herself to stay in bed for as long as possible. So she was hopeful for tomorrow. She took a sip of her coffee and thought about it for a second. She wasn't sure what she had planned for today, but she knew it wasn't for a few hours at least. She couldn't get back to sleep anyways, and the benefits of being the one to go with her mom meant that she could pick the snacks. So, my first author's note is Sam saying she has such trouble sleeping. That one is 100% true. And yes, it does run in the family. Like, my mom always had trouble sleeping. I kind of inherited it. And I think it's because our minds just never stop moving. So we're always thinking about stuff. Some of my best teaching ideas have come to me literally 3 o'clock in the morning. Like it's 3 o'clock at night, and I'm jumping out of bed to like jot down notes of a game I used to call Pass the Penguin, or like, ooh, this is a great activity for this class, or whatever it was. I know one night I had trouble sleeping because I had created kind of a huge ancient Egyptian project for my seventh graders back in the States, including like outlines of different gods and goddesses, and they had to translate the hieroglyphics. It was obviously simplified hieroglyphics, but it was really cool. And I spent hours like creating a Rosetta Stone so that they could translate it, and like got like 3 hours of sleep and then went to school. So still to this day, I have trouble sleeping. Again, my brain never stops moving. So it's like really hard. On top of which, it's when it's hot out, it's really rough. My cats can be really difficult, but it's mainly this. It just never stops going. So if I have stuff on my mind, it's like really hard for me to put it in a I've tried to do this before where I imagine a box and I imagine putting all those thoughts in a box and then closing the box and putting it on my bookshelf. Sometimes it works. Most of the time it doesn't. Do I still do it? Yes, and I pray. I'm just like, please, oh please, let me sleep. So the lack of sleep, 100%. Anyways, back to the story. Yeah, sure, she replied, making a mental note of things she wanted to look for at the store. They sat and sipped their coffee while watching some show on HGTV. Her mom and her always watched either cooking shows on the Food Network or home improvement shows on HGTV. It was kind of their own personal tradition. When the coffees were finished, they both went their separate ways to get ready. Sam threw on jeans and a t shirt and the sweatshirt she had stolen from Ben, but then quickly took the sweatshirt off. They had plans to talk today, but they were technically broken up right now, so it seemed weird to wear the sweatshirt. She grabbed one of her other sweaters and headed down the stairs to meet her mom. Sam wasn't sure what it was about grocery shopping that had always calmed her, but it did. Her mom parked and they got out, started walking across the parking lot towards the front doors of the store. Grab a carriage, her mom said as she pulled the list from her purse with the pen attached to it. Ma'am, Sam smiled to herself as she grabbed the cart and then assumed her usual positions, forearms on the handle so she could push it while resting in a slouched position. They started in the produce section and would then work their way down each aisle, her mom checking her list as they went. Sam's job was pushing the cart and occasionally running back to grab something they had forgotten. Sometimes her mom would hand her the list and put her in charge of crossing things off. It was like a weird choreographed dance that they had been doing since Sam was a little girl. They barely had to speak and somehow always knew what the other needed to get this task done. Things had been a little tense between them for a while. Sam knew that her mom did not like Ben, and to be fair, Ben wasn't a big fan of her mother either. She was stuck, caught between a rock and a hard place because she loved her mom, but she was also in love with Ben. She knew he was a jerk sometimes, but she couldn't help but love him. He was smart, funny, and goofy, and he was in a band. He was taller than her and made her feel so petite, which was something she had never really felt in her life. Sure, he wasn't always kind, and he definitely wasn't always supportive, but they could work through those things. She was still replaying the last argument they had in her head. He was upset because she had gone bowling with a group of her friends for the first time in months, but she hadn't known that her ex Bobby was going to be there. They had dated briefly during freshman year, and they had stayed friends after the breakup, but for some reason, Ben never trusted him. When he found out, he was so pissed off at her that he told her, just go be with him then, and kicked her out of the car. He had finally texted her back yesterday, and they had plans to meet up this afternoon. She wasn't entirely sure what the hell he was planning to say, but she knew that she didn't want to lose him. This was the first time that she felt like she was in love, and she wasn't willing to give up that feeling without a fight. She was still going over their argument in her head and trying to figure out what she was going to say to him when she snapped back to reality. Her mother was staring at her, as if she had been talking for the past few minutes and nothing had gone through. Earth to Sammy. Come in, Sammy. Sam finally heard her say, and she apologized and blamed it on being tired. Well, listen, grab 3 bags of chips for the house. You can even choose which ones, she said. Sam smiled as she grabbed a bag of Fritos, a bag of barbecue chips, and a massive bag of tortilla chips. Solid choices, her mom said as she moved back down the chip aisle. They only had to make it down the frozen section, and then they would be checking out and heading home to unpack all of it. So, how's everything going? Her mom asked, taking the opportunity since Sam seemed conscious now. Sam wasn't sure how much of the argument her mother had heard from Ben's car that night. But she wasn't about to talk about it and end up with her mother hating him even more. Everything's fine, just sleepy, Sam said evasively. Her mom looked at her, trying to hide the concern on her face. But Sam had always been good at reading people, and she could see the worry that tinted her mother's expression. How's Ben? Her mother asked. But Sam was ready for this one too. Her mom, despite not liking him, had resigned herself to pretending for her daughter's sake. Oh, he's fine. Just working, going to school, and all of that, she said, again with nonchalance that shocked even herself. Well, that's good, her mother said, with a shadow of strain in her voice, trying to sound as calm and collected as possible. Another author's note is the grocery shopping. That is still one of my favorite activities to this day. I love grocery shopping. I love going to the grocery store. It's less fun now because I do not drive in Morocco and will never drive in Morocco. So if I'm doing like a big grocery shop, I have to bring my rolly bag and roll it back to my apartment, which is, if anybody's used an actual rolly bag, it doesn't make it, it makes it easier, but it's not easy. Like you're still toting a lot of stuff. I usually only use it when I'm buying stuff for the cats because I have to buy food and litter and stuff, and it's real heavy. Most of the time, especially lately, I've been trying to like grocery shop more locally at like my local produce guys who are like right downstairs and then right around the corner. So I try to, or like buy from the bakery instead of going to like Carrefour Marjan. So I don't grocery shop like I used to. Um, I do remember in 2020, it got real weird because we could only leave once a week to go grocery shopping. And so I always had my rolly cart, and things got a little dicey, especially when I had to get cat stuff or I had to get a bag of flour because I was making a lot of bread in 2020. Um, but the grocery shopping things is 100% true because I was always, or a lot of the times I was up early, my mom would always say, "Do you want to come?" And I almost 100% of the time was like, "Yeah," because I got to pick the snacks. There was more of a chance of me getting Fritos. I've never been a sweets kid, so I was not like ice cream or cake or whatever, but chips. Chips is my own personal demon. I love chips so much. Um, but yeah, I used to go grocery shopping with my mom. Sometimes I would go with my dad, but most of the time that was when I was like really little. And like those are not memories, they're like stories that my dad has told me, like him walking through the grocery store with like me and my little sister in the cart and being like, "What do you think? Peas or green beans?" "You're right. Peas is a good plan." Neither one of us spoke. We were too little. And like he would tell us, the ladies at the grocery store would be walking by and be like, because he'd have whole grown up conversations with us going through the grocery store. And especially in like the late 80s, early 90s, that was weird. Nowadays, you see more of it because we understand more about cognitive development of children. And so less people are treating their babies with like baby voices and they're talking to their kids even before they can fully understand. And it's been proven very effective for creating your kids like vocabulary and verbal understanding and listening skills. Um, I can confirm that from teaching English as a second language or English language learners. It's not a second language because many of my kids speak like two or three languages already, which is crazy. Because I'm useless and don't speak anything really except for tidbits of French and Darija and a little bit of Spanish and some German and a little bit of Czech because I spent time in the Czech Republic. Um, but yeah, so grocery shopping for me has always been like a place of peace because A, I get to pick snacks. Food is one of my love languages. I love food. Um, Again, me and my family, not petite people. There's a reason. I love food and I love my snacks. But grocery shopping has always been kind of one of my absolute favorite activities and still is to this day. Love to go grocery shopping, love seeing what they have, especially if I'm doing local. Sometimes they have like special things, and then I can like make the plan for the future of my household and what I'm going to shove in my face. Anyways, back to the story. When they got home half an hour later, they unpacked the car, and at that point, her sister was awake and helped them put all the groceries away in the various cabinets. Sam decided to take a shower and see if the hot water would rinse away all of her worries before she had to meet up with Ben. She wanted to see him and work this out, but she was also anxious about what the outcome would be. She stood under the hot water, hoping it would melt the nervousness right out of her body. Unfortunately, when she was alone with her thoughts, they tended to get louder rather than softer. She knew that he was being irrational and that Bobby was the furthest thing from a threat to their relationship. But then again, she understood that he was feeling insecure about it. She wasn't sure what to do, but realized that she had scrubbed herself pink and she wasn't the kind of person to just stand under the water. She hopped out and dried herself off, wrapping the bright orange terry cloth robe her mom had gotten her when she was 13 around herself. It was a horrible color, but Sam had always liked it because of its garishness. She went upstairs and combed her hair out before sitting on her bed in her bathrobe. She had gotten a text from Ben that said he would be there by 3 to talk things over. She sighed, walked back over to her dresser, sitting in front of the mirror and looking at the pictures tucked into the wooden frame. She had always loved the pictures of them on the swings. They had gone behind her old elementary school to play on the playground with some friends and acted like they were kids again. It had been one of those nights that was so simple, but it had become this romantic zenith in her own mind. In the photo, she was wearing a necklace with his guitar pick hanging from it, and she wondered where that had gone. She started to dig through her dresser drawers on either side when she felt something in the back of one of them. What the hell? She said as she pulled out the dusty old cassette tape out of the drawer. It had her name on it and a date. May 16th, 1999, 2004. Sam saw what would be tomorrow's date and she blinked at the tape, not knowing what the hell this was. Then the realization hit. That time she was at camp and had time traveled to 2004. She laughed to herself, impressed with the level of imagination she used to have. She looked around and saw her boombox sitting on the bookshelf near her bed. She popped the tape in, laid down on her bed, and started to listen. She was half listening as she got ready to meet Ben. She was picking out an outfit that she knew Ben would like when she heard little Sam mention her dating Ben, which was a pretty weird coincidence. Then again, Ben was on that camping trip with them, so she could have just made a guess or a wish that they would date eventually. She didn't have time to listen to the rest of it and pressed stop. She pulled the tape and put it back in its case, laughing to herself for believing the musings of a 12-year-old overly dramatic Sam. She put it to the back of her mind as she brushed through her hair again to make sure it looked all right. Her phone dinged and she saw the text alerting her that Ben was here. She shot down the stairs like a bat out of hell and hollered to her mom that she would be back later. She was out the door and walking down the front steps before her mom could even finish, "Love you." She slowed down before she got to the passenger side door, took a deep breath, and tried to center herself, regardless of the fact that she felt so wholeheartedly off kilter. She climbed in, and Ben didn't even glance over, but instead said a curt, "Hey," and took off as soon as her door was closed. She rolled her eyes and sighed, buckled her seatbelt, and they sat in uncomfortable silence for a while until he pulled into their favorite parking lot by the lake. "So," Sam said, trying to break the tension. "So, Ben replied, refusing to be the first to speak. He was always stubborn and generally always waiting for her apology when these things happened. She really didn't want to have to apologize this time, but she also didn't see any other way. He wasn't going to magically stop being mad, and she wasn't willing to let him go. I'm sorry, she said, looking down at her lap. She clasped her hands in front of hers as if hoping to physically show her atonement for whatever sins he thought she had committed. You're sorry for what? He said, still glaring at the lake as if it had recently hit his dog. His words were quiet, and even though she could hear the venom he was trying to inject into her. Listen, I'm sorry that I didn't tell you Bobby was going to be there. I didn't even know he was coming. It was a last minute thing, she explained, the words pouring out of her as if she were a pitcher of water being tipped on its side. He was still staring at the lake, and she could feel the lump in her throat and the threat of tears starting. She swallowed the lump in her throat and did her best to choke back those tears. She knew crying would only make it worse. Can't we just let this go and move on? She asked him. I promise it won't happen again, she said with a tinge of desperation in her voice that she knew he could hear. At this point, she didn't care if she looked stupid and pathetic. She had spent too much time building this relationship to throw it away over something as silly as a game of bowling. Plus, Bobby would understand that they couldn't spend time with each other outside of school. They'd still be able to hang out at lunch and stuff, right? All these thoughts were running through her head, trying to convince her that this was the right way to fix everything. He finally turned to her, and his face had softened a little. She could see the tears welling up in her eyes. And finally, he said, Yeah, it's okay. I just don't like you hanging out with that guy when I'm not around, he explained. She understood his side of this, and she was willing to make changes if it meant that they would stay together. She sat there, unsure of what to do next, but trying her best to not start crying. She wiped her eyes on her sleeve and sniffled a little. He held his hand out for hers, and she grasped it like she was the survivor of the Titanic grasping the first life vest she could get her hands on. He leaned over and kissed her then, and the fireworks were still there. Proof that they were meant to be, and she had made the right decision. Bobby would have to understand. He started the car, and they pulled out of the lake parking lot, and he was asking if she was hungry. She suddenly realized she hadn't eaten all day and she was starving. So they went to the Wendy's drive-thru and ordered spicy chicken sandwich meals and then drove back to the lake parking lot to eat their lunch. All right. I think a final author's note. And I need this to be incredibly clear. The boyfriend in this story is not just one boy that I dated in high school. The prom story, absolutely, based in truthfulness, it did happen. But this was not just one person. Over the years, and I was dating in high school, I dated in college, I dated not a lot. I'm not crazy. But like I dated a lot of people and I was really really desperate to feel loved by someone. And so this was not just based on one boy. This was something that happened from like 16 until my 30s, which is really sad to admit to the internet. But the reason I'm doing it is because all of the patterns continued from high school until my 30s. And a lot of it like was me, like we would break up and then we'd get back together. And I'm the kind of person who jumps in like head first to relationships. And so I fall fast and hard. And it's really hard to get me focused back in on, oh, this behavior is not okay. And the reason that this chapter is called Apologies in the Art of Making Yourself Smaller is because I did it for over a decade, almost two. Actually, I think it was two, to be honest, or really close to. And it was the idea of even when I wasn't doing anything wrong and my partner, my boyfriend, or whoever was the one doing something wrong, my response was always, I'm sorry. And eventually I just made myself smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's taken me a long time to try to get myself back. I'm still working on it, still to this day working on it. But the reason I wanted to include this author's note for anybody who watches or is reading the book itself, never make yourself smaller for someone, no matter who they are. Like, ever. Because the smaller you make yourself, it's so much harder to expand back into who you should be. It's so hard. One of the most difficult things. And again, I'm still working on it, and I'm almost 40 now. So, like, it's rough. And once you put yourself in that situation of making yourself smaller for a partner, you're more likely to do it again because you've already done it. You've already compacted yourself. So now you're just like, okay. And it just really wasn't good. I am not proud of it by any means, shape, or form. It's one of, I mean, the single most collective mistake of my life is allowing people to treat me like that. But it also wasn't just boyfriends. I had bosses, I had other people in my life, friends, whoever. Again, not going to name names. But there were a lot of people throughout my life who basically just made me feel small. You'll also, the other thing you'll see in this book is Sam has wonderful friends throughout her life. I had good friends, but I also never felt like I had somebody who would like put me first, who would be there if I called them. A lot of the times I was the person that would only have plans if somebody wanted to do something and no one else was around. So that also just compacts you, makes you feel small. So it was kind of like this whole behavioral thing is the thing I wanted to focus on the most. Like, this is not a real person. This is something that happened. And it happens to people all the time, of people willing to make themselves small in order to not be alone. And I'm here to tell you, you don't have to. Don't make yourself smaller. You are worth more than that. So is Sam. I like to think I am sometimes. Again, therapy, lots of it. But yeah, never make yourself smaller for other people. If somebody can't deal with you at your absolute best, they definitely don't deserve to be there all the time. Anyways, back to the final part of the story. He had already finished his sandwich and was munching on his fries, dipping them in his Frosty on occasion, when Sam asked him, "So I've been meaning to ask you, what color should I wear for prom?" She wanted to remind him of the good times they had planned. His face, however, suddenly seemed overcast and stormy at the mention of it. What's wrong? She asked him, suddenly panicked. She put her sandwich down on the paper resting in her lap, looking at him with concern. Well, I need to tell you something, he said. Today had already been a whirlwind of emotions, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear whatever it was he had to say. Okay, she replied tentatively, waiting for him to continue. Will you remember Tiffany? He asked. And Sam found herself replying in the affirmative, though the tension in her jaw threatened to keep her teeth tightly clenched together. Well, he paused before explaining. She saw me yesterday at school and asked me about my plans for prom. Since we were broken up, I told her I wasn't sure what my plans were, and she asked if I'd go with her. I said I would. Sam was livid. What do you mean? You said yes, she said, pausing between each word as if she wanted each one to be an individual assault on his ears. Listen, I can't just drop out on her now. A man is only as good as his word, he explained, still dipping his fries in his Frosty. Sam sat there with her shoulders threatening to swallow her head whole with all the muscle tension. Her jaw was a solid chunk of clenched, angry muscle. She took a deep breath and shoved a naked French fry in her mouth, chewing angrily. She took another deep breath and sipped on her Diet Coke. They had just gotten into a massive fight because she had gone bowling with one of her exes, in a group of people, she might add. And now he was dropping the bombshell that he was taking another girl to prom. She weighed her options in her own head. On the one hand, she could throw a hissy fit and then they would be back to square one. She would also have to apologize for that, too. The alternative would be to just let this go and allow this girl to take her boyfriend to prom. Sam thought about it, and the more she considered it, the less and less she cared about prom. She had attended the junior prom last year, and it had been sort of fun, but it was way more hyped up and wasn't the night she thought it was going to be. She could always just skip it, save money on the dress and the ticket and stuff. Okay, she said, almost in a whisper. He smiled. Thanks for being so understanding, he said. I know you'd be cool. This is why I love you so much. Sam was focused on that last sentence, and she repeated it over and over again in her head until he had dropped her off at home. When she got home, she said hi to her family and then headed up to her room. It wasn't late, but it was already dark out, and she was completely over today already. She climbed into Ben's Ramon shirt and then crawled into her bed, hugging the stuffed puppy for dear life. This is why he loves me so much, she said over and over again, with tears streaming down her face. Eventually, she drifted off to sleep, completely forgetting about the cassette tape in her boombox that seemed to promise a new adventure tomorrow. I just want to say one more time, thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you who are coming back, thank you so much. I deeply appreciate all the love and support that I'm getting, mostly from my former students, to be honest. But this has been a really meaningful project for me, and I appreciate anybody who's connecting to it and listening. I do appreciate it. Remember something I always try to end the videos with, sometimes I forget. Keep spreading sunshine. Know that you are loved and cared for by somebody in this world. And keep just being kind and spreading goodness. Kindness is so, so important, especially nowadays when everything is on fire. So don't let this video get you down. Remember what I said. Don't make yourself smaller for anyone because you're worth more than that. All right. I hope you have a wonderful week. We'll be back next Saturday with chapter 10. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great week.